Hey guys.
Hey Marcus.
How are you?
We're
Great.
Really?
You hear how's like the sound, the video? You see us, you hear us.
Good, man. You guys are beautiful.
Great.
So
Good on my end too?
Yeah.
yeah, we hear you great.
Hear you great.
Okay.
So thanks for
Having us.
having us. Thanks for coming. Thanks for it means a lot to us. It means a lot to a lot of people in Israel.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the flexibility and me having to change schedules a little bit. It's been, just getting used to having a baby and, my wife's needs and the baby's needs, and so just kind of thank you.
So let's just dive in. Let's tell us a little bit about yourself. For the audience.
Yeah, okay. So, I guess this particular audience, a fitness audience, probably a CrossFit base. So I'll kind of stick to that in terms of my background. But yeah, people may have seen me in the CrossFit Games or at regionals. I've been a competitor in CrossFit for, I guess I'm going on 8 years. So I did my first CrossFit Games in 2010. And then since then, I've taken 2 years where I didn't compete, but the 6 years that I competed, I was open regionals, games athlete on teams and individually, and I've been a fitness coach the whole time. So in 2009, I started my career as a fitness professional, and I've been coaching individual athletes, and also I was a group fitness owner, gym owner. So I owned a CrossFit affiliate for 5 years. I no longer do, but I still coach a lot of athletes worldwide. And and I'm a father and a husband now. So that's kind of
congratulations, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So you started your fitness career in 2009. When were you exposed to CrossFit? When was your first?
Yeah, my first exposure to CrossFit was in 2000. I think it goes back to 2008. Actually, was my first. Maybe 2007. It's still a little muddled in my brain. It was either December 2007 or January 2008. But I kind of had the similar story to most folks that found it around that time, because it was still not well known in the general population. And I was doing lots of fitness things at the time. I've been training as an athlete with strength and conditioning for almost 20 years now. But when I got, exposed to, in 2008, I had a friend that said, "Hey, I'm doing this class," and she was a friend of mine we did classes together at like the Globo Gym. We did like the core class and the athletic performance class. And she said, "Oh, I go to this class in San Francisco. It's outside. It's great. You should come." I was like, "Okay." We did all this stuff together. And so it turns out it was CrossFit, and it was Kelly Starrett's gym, San Francisco CrossFit, and it was 2008, like I said, and I showed up. It was in a parking lot, and there was 20 people, and Kelly Starrett was the coach, and he was, if you know him and if you've seen any of his stuff, he was super charismatic.
Everybody.
Yeah, right. Super charismatic. He led a great warm-up. We did deadlifts and sprints, and I was hooked. I was like, "Oh, this is great." And so I think that afternoon we went to the gym, me and my buddy, and we did some more working out because we just love to train. And I started to dive really into what was CrossFit, and looked up the website, CrossFit.com, and just went down the rabbit hole of exploring what it was to be, doing the movements, functional movements, understanding what all the benchmarks were, and watching every video there ever was on HQ's journal and the website.
Great. Here in Israel, the first affiliate opened 6 years ago. I think it was the first one that opened here in Israel. So we were exposed to strength and conditioning, I think, through CrossFit. And we don't have football, so we just play soccer. So strength and conditioning was a term that was a kind of, like really underground thing. And then CrossFit exposed the Israelis to strength and conditioning.
Right. I think football played a big role in the United States in developing strength and conditioning programs, because I played soccer in college. That was my sport. and we did strength and conditioning, but we basically just did the football team's program. Like, they handed us a sheet of paper, said, okay, go do, power clean, back squat, deadlift, bench press, pull, and I was watching the football team train, and I was like, oh, it's the same program. Fine. And I loved it because I was a goalkeeper, and so I needed to be, powerful. I needed to have a bit more mass. I needed to be able to jump. I mean, those skills translated well to me.
So it wasn't a new thing for you to really be an athlete, to be in a competitive environment, and when you got to CrossFit. When did you make the connection, deciding to start to go and be a competitive athlete at CrossFit?
Yeah. I mean, competitive athletics was not new to me. I mean, I had done, as I mentioned, I played soccer all the way up through university, which was pretty high level for the States. I mean, many of my teammates went on to kind of be stars in the MLS. So I had played at a high level, but, and I also played junior sports like golf and baseball, things like that. But, fitness as a sport was such a foreign concept when I first started. I mean, it's like I wanted to work out, and of course you're timing yourself against other people in workouts, or for me, it was more like timing myself against just what I saw on the computer, like on .com. It was, that's the workout of the day, and that's what other people's scores were. So, I started to get into a competitive mindset. But then when I joined my first affiliate in 2009, they had a team that had gone to the CrossFit Games in 2009 in Aromas, and they had competed, and they did quite well, maybe 12th place at the time, but you didn't have to qualify back then. You just signed up and you could go. So I started to get recruited basically by people to say, oh, you're good at this, and there's this competitive scene going on. And to me, since I was such a fan of what was on .com, and I idolized, Chris Spieler and James Fitzgerald and, Josh Everett and some of the original people that were competing at the 2008 games, the 2007 games, the 2009 games. I always put them way up on this pedestal up here, oh gosh, I could never be like that, and I'm just trying to be, I'm just trying to better myself along the way. And then I think it was in 2010 and a little bit in 2011 more so, where my skills as a CrossFit athlete, they started to just, there was no denying that I was doing well, that I was better than a lot of people, and that when I would be in a team environment, I was the best on my team. And in the couple, scenarios where I did some individual competition, I placed well. So, it just I started to recognize, I was like, okay, well, maybe they're not way up here. Maybe I'm starting to become part of that group. And that was what I think fueled my, the next stages of my CrossFit, fitness career. But yeah, competing wasn't new to me, but competing as an individual in a sport was kind of a new thing because I'd been on teams in the past. So to make that transition from team CrossFit to individual CrossFit was difficult for me.
Okay.
Scary. Scary to me.
A lot of things changed since 2009. As you said, in 2009 you could just sign up and then
yes.
go to CrossFit Games. And nowadays they're open regionals, and it looks like competitive CrossFit is different from normal CrossFit, or general population CrossFit. And
yes.
So the question is, how do you think, is it possible now for an average CrossFit athlete that works out as an affiliate get to this regionals level?
Or CrossFit Games level.
Games level.
Yeah. That's a great question.
It's it feels like it's too late. If you didn't start it a few years ago, then it's just too late. The train is gone.
Yeah, I mean, the train is definitely moving fast, okay? But the train still allows newcomers to get on, okay? Just what it costs to get onto the train is a lot higher than it used to be. And that's just the nature of any sport, that is around for longer periods of time, is that, as we start to understand better how to train for the sport, as the incentives for being in the sport and placing well grow, it draws more people to it. And when there's a bigger population of people doing a sport, you naturally get this like kind of separation of like, well, these are the top people and these are the people that are just your everyday, sick people. And then this is kind of your general population in the middle. And so even back in 2007, you still had that separation. The problem was that it was just such a small group compared to who's doing the, fitness today. So you could, once upon a time, doing group fitness classes or doing the workout of the day was what people believed was the top of training, right? I do.com every day. That's what gets me prepared for the CrossFit Games 2007, right? The champion did one workout a day, 3 days on, 1 day off for 4 years in a row and won the CrossFit Games, okay? Mm-hmm. But now we recognize that workout of the day, if you're going to truly be an elite level CrossFitter, because of the way the sport has evolved, is a small portion of what a daily training program looks like for your elite level CrossFitter. So to be an average group fitness, like I come into a box and then I want to maybe take it to the next level, go to regionals, go to the games, it is possible, but at first you have to recognize and you have to actually select for who's the right person to do that, and that comes down to like, looking at their athletic background, testing them in a variety of different, CrossFit specific tests, doing some strength evaluation, and then you can sort of get an idea of like, well, this person has potential, or this person, maybe doesn't have the potential, right? Like, so if you show up to the box, you're 28 years old, you've never done any training in your life, meaning you don't have sports background, you've never lifted weights, maybe you're just like an athletic person, but you don't have any training experience, then I don't care how good you are in the first week, you got a long time before you're ever going to be able to handle the volume of training necessary to make it to regionals or the games. So, and that's just a rule, right? So like the people that come in their first year, they go to regionals, they're not that person. They have trained for many, many years prior to that. They didn't do CrossFit, but they did Olympic weightlifting. They were in the Army and they were, training, doing PT every day. They were lifting weights. They were doing bodybuilding. They played water polo and they lifted weights at night, or they had a training background. But like I have a client currently who I'm working with from Sweden who contacted me. He's like, he wants to get better at CrossFit, maybe compete in some stuff. I'm like, what were you doing before CrossFit? He's like, nothing. I'm like, okay, he's been doing CrossFit for 3 years, but just like group class workouts, he's got no strength and conditioning background. So I'm like, all right, well, we got to put in 3 years of strength and conditioning before we can even consider, what the next tier of competition looks like. So is it possible? Yes, it has to be the right person. And once you identify the right person, then they need to be kind of extracted from the one workout a day group model, and they need to be put on a training plan that looks appropriate to get them the skills, the volume, the strength, and just like the technique, required to do well in the sport, because it's all of those things combined now.
Okay. I want to like ask like a little bit more specific. Like as a coach,
yes.
How do you tackle like an athlete's weakness? Like if you have a weak athlete or not strong enough, do you believe that you should always do CrossFit as in constantly varied functional movements, or do you believe in strength cycles or gymnastic cycles or any kind of like specific work that is not by definition CrossFit?
Yeah, I mean, well, within your question, I understand your question, but let's be clear that CrossFit defined, constantly varied, high intensity functional movements performed, broad time, modal domains, that would be, you're right, that would be just considered CrossFit. So anything within that realm falls into the definition of CrossFit, although nobody is defining what it looks like in a program anymore except for .com. CrossFit.com this is what CrossFit is prescribed, right? The CrossFit Games and regionals and all those, even the Open, they're not even saying that this is what CrossFit is. They're saying that's the sport of CrossFit. But so it's difficult to know exactly what the definition of CrossFit is beyond just the words that I said. It's like, what does it look like in a program? Well, I think it can look a lot of different ways. But to your point, or to your question, how do I address someone's weaknesses? Well, first you have to really be good at identifying weaknesses, right? And I think that in the CrossFit community, people that are looking to compete, people that are paying attention to their abilities and how they're progressing, they tend to be relatively bad at identifying their weaknesses. They go do a workout with, toes to bar, double unders, and wall balls. And they do poorly in that workout. Okay, it's 18 minutes long, and it's, 10 reps of each, and it's just an AMRAP. Okay? And they do bad in that workout, and they're like, man, I suck at 18-minute AMRAPs. I got to go do more AMRAPs with 18 minutes. Okay? But when you watch them do it, they're great at, what did I say? It was jump rope, a double under. Yeah, they're good at wall balls, they're good at double unders, and then they do toes to bar and they're doing singles because they have crappy grip endurance or they have really poor anterior core strength. Okay, so their assessment was, I'm bad at 18-minute workouts. So they go and do a bunch of 18-minute workouts. But in reality, you can really break it down into more specific traits that they're not so good at. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's like as a coach, and this is what I've probably worked on the most and gotten better at over 9 years of coaching, is assessing clients' fitness abilities, not just their movement, right? Like, is that a good squat? Yes, it's a good squat. Is that a bad squat? Yeah, it's a bad squat. We could fix this, right? That's one part. That's just like, that's the basics, right? But then it's like, okay, what skills are they actually deficient in? And then if I take all 5 of those skills that they're deficient in, what's the common theme across that, right? And then if I look at their strength, like if I plot back squat, front squat, deadlift, power clean, bench press, power snatch, squat snatch, weighted dip, weighted pull up, where are their actual deficits? How do I compare those numbers? What's it supposed to look like? And then you go another step further, like 18-minute AMRAP, 5-minute AMRAP, 3 rounds for time, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 2K row. Like, how do I actually look at that and determine what are they weak at? So assessing a client's true weaknesses is the first stage. And if that's done incorrectly, then the programs are going to be messed up first. So when I'm coaching, how do I prioritize things? Well, first I do a really broad assessment of my client's abilities. If they want to be good at CrossFit as a sport, as an athlete, the sport, then I test them in a lot of different stuff CrossFit related. And then based upon those assessments, you can typically come up with 2 to 3 priorities for a client that will give them the most bang for their buck, right? So let's say, we assess them and they do great in workouts that don't, exceed a certain percentage of weight, okay. All right? And we determine that, yes, they are truly weak relative to the field. They have low absolute strength, for example. So they back squat 260 pounds and they power clean 225 pounds. All right? This is a very simple example. So 225, you're like, oh man, that's not a very good power clean. There's guys that are power cleaning 315, right? In CrossFit. So, and sorry, we're talking to a male athlete here, not a female. So a male athlete that's got a 260 back squat and a 220 power clean, you guys say, okay, we got to get their power clean heavier, right? Because all these workouts have power cleans in them. But then you look at their back squat and you're like, you know what? For a 260 back squat, a 220 power clean is pretty good. Yeah. That's actually not bad. That's almost that's 80% of their, back squat. So I could give them power cleans every day, but they're not going to get stronger in the power clean until their back squat goes up and up and up. So really this person needs to back squat maybe 3 times a week, or maybe that's how the program needs to be identified. And so, yes, I would prioritize for that particular person a strength-biased program. But I also believe at the same time that the days of like true strength-biased programs where they do nothing else and it's just like, you go in and you do 5x5 in the back squat, and the next day you do 5x5 in the deadlift, and the next day you do 5x5 in the press, and you just limit all your conditioning. Like, to your point, there's too many people in the game, and it's too far developed to just completely ignore the rest of your training. So, a good balanced program certainly would look like addressing that person's weaknesses. And if it's in the case of the client I mentioned before who just came to me, I assessed a lot of stuff. And based upon what they showed me, they were pretty good in a lot of CrossFit, given their strength numbers. But he's just not strong. I mean, he's 160 pounds, skinny, like 5'10". I mean, and these are like, that's like me 35 pounds less. And it's like, okay, well, that's not going to cut it in the sport. He's got to pack on some meat. He can do good muscle ups. He can row a pretty good 2K, but his 2K is not going to get better until he gets stronger to put more, power into that row. So yes, his program looks like 4 days a week of like bodybuilding, just building muscle and building, foundational strength. And yeah, he's doing skills like toes to bar and kipping, gymnastics, and, understanding a little bit of like, pacing on breathing. But that's a heavily biased, he's doing lots of strength. And I told him, I was like, we're going to do this for 2 years. We're going to get you fit.
It's not even like a 2-month cycle.
Yeah, it's like a 2-year cycle, not a 2-month cycle. It's like, and so in 2 years, he'll be, 27 years old. And hey, we'll see what happens then. We'll see but you have to be realistic with people, and you have to set realistic expectations. Like, if you haven't trained and you just showed up at the gym and you want to make it to regionals and you've got, you've been doing CrossFit for 1 year and you've got nothing else before that, be like, okay, maybe in 3 to 5 years we could talk about this, but you got to put in some really good work.
I think Rich Froning said it, that nobody dribbles a ball and thinks they can get to the NBA. And that's what, like, it takes time for people to realize in CrossFit that these athletes, like CrossFit Games athletes, are on a really, really high level. Like genuinely really athlete. That's like the top, 5. That's what they do. That's they don't have any like hobbies or other things.
Yeah, it requires, there's a lot of time and energy that does go into the sport. And then in addition to what Rich said, it's like you have to look prior to what they did before CrossFit, right? Because even 5 years of CrossFitting, but that's the only thing that you've done and you have nothing before that, right? That's not as good as somebody who did 10 years of strength and conditioning plus 5 years of CrossFit,
right?
And Rich Froning is a perfect example. Like, he played lots of sports when he grew up. He loved to lift weights. He talks about, doing bodybuilding stuff when he was in college and, before that. So it's like, okay, all of that stuff. And then one day someone's like, hey, here's this thing called CrossFit. It's kind of, same in my case. I showed up to my first CrossFit class and I was doing 225 deadlifts for reps and sprinting, Not many people do that on their first day. Nope. So I was already kind of ahead of the game because of what I had done before.
How long does it take you to take a client through full assessment when you get a new client?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, with my remote clients, so clients that I coach from overseas and around the country, it's about 2 to 3 weeks of testing workouts that I give them. Yeah. And then, I'm constantly reevaluating and assessing them over time, but I do a 3-week kind of like, for someone who's like, I want to do CrossFit as a sport, I got a 3-week testing protocol that I give them. And it's like, okay, at the end of 3 weeks, we'll see really where things are at. Clients that come in on site that train here, there's 2 to 3 90-minute in-person sessions where we can uncover a lot. And then additionally, there will be, assessment or testing workouts that they would do that I don't need to be there. I need to know their results from.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have a quick question about, you said that you had affiliate. And I just wanted to ask you something about affiliate programming. Just a normal affiliate, not something competitive. general affiliate. And now we see a lot of programs that have some strength piece and then a conditioning piece, and this is how affiliates work. And here at our affiliate, in Marco have an affiliate, we program more like main site. Just this is the workout of the day. Sometimes it can be just any, and that's the workout. And so I just want to hear what you think about it. Should you program always strength and conditioning? Maybe this the next
for the general population.
For the general population, or just keep it simple, just as CrossFit did it, and to put your time in developing skills and spending time with your clients.
Gosh, it's such a difficult question. I mean, I owned an affiliate for years, right? And I programmed for my affiliate. The direction that I ultimately went was thinking about the client that I had in front of me. Okay, who is the person coming in my door, right? Am I going to put Amanda up on the whiteboard for my client? Think about your members. How many of them want to do snatches and muscle ups? Squat, snatch, and muscle up. 975. That's a great workout. I mean, it's a phenomenal, CrossFit benchmark, and I love that that workout. But when I looked at my across the board at my membership, I maybe had 2 people out of 150 that could do that workout RX, 0 females that could do it RX, and 2 men. So could I write that on the board and then scale it down? Scale it in load, and maybe instead of muscle ups, I could do a pull up dip combination, and I could do all those things. But I found it to be not as, for me in the group setting, it didn't flow as well for my clients, and they didn't get as much fulfillment out of if I had programmed a strength and conditioning, workout that helped them address their upper body pushing and upper body pulling. So maybe it was strict pull-ups and, strict dips for strength training with rest, right? And then maybe we did some technique work in the snatch. So they did hang power snatch technique, overhead squat technique. So low loads, for reps. And then at the end of the class, they did some intervals on the bike. Right. And so, they got the same things that they may have gotten from that benchmark workout. But on a typical training day at the gym, it was more broken down into the segments of training so that they could give full effort, not necessarily do it always under fatigue. Right. Because a lot of benchmark workouts, Annie included, you're doing sit-ups and double unders, but you're under fatigue. Right. And so, clients want to get better at skills. Some clients handle fatigue better than others. And so that's it. Thinking about general population, I love to give a benchmark. We used to give benchmarks every 2 months. We would do a week of benchmarks. And then we would spend 2 months of training, fewer benchmarks, more work, rest, strength training. And then 2 months later, we do it again, more benchmarks, right? And so they could see their progress, every couple months by having a chance to do things like learn double unders, get their split jerk better, get their snatch better, have open gym time to maybe do muscle up training. But that was my approach for the general population, and that's when you're trying to consider 150 different people's, preferences, abilities, how much they slept the night before, how bad their diet is, or how good their diet is. And it's much easier when it's just one-on-one, right? If I'm just coaching you, hey, you have goals. We've clearly defined what they are. This is your assessment. Clearly define what you're capable of. These are the workouts that we're going to help you get your goals. Keep your assessment in mind. And we do that for a period of time on a schedule that you are, structured with. And then every so often we reevaluate and retest to make sure that our program is making you better. And then in the meantime, we talk nutrition. We talk about things that are relevant to you. So, those are the kind of 2 different ways I had to look at it, because I used to coach individuals and groups. And now I'm not coaching groups right now. I haven't done any group training in a while.
Okay. So,
Functional bodybuilding.
Yeah, that's
we really want to talk about that.
The most interesting part, I think.
Do you want to define it for to come from you? So we won't, I don't know,
Sure,
What
yeah.
is-
So you guys aren't going to like just make up some random definition. You know, I'm still in the process of really refining my definition of functional bodybuilding. There is like for me, I started talking about functional bodybuilding as it was more of a feeling, and then which turned into kind of a mindset around, training. So in this last season, the last off season, so from 2016 to 2017, during my off season, my training had to be different than it was the year before because I was, I was just coming off of a competitive season versus the previous year I didn't compete, so I had a longer off season. My shoulder was pretty badly. I don't want to say it was it's injured. I was just in a lot of pain. I had a lot of dysfunction in my shoulder from, imbalances that weren't addressed for too long, too much intensity for too many months. So my training started to look a lot more like, broken down, segmented, some isolated training, a lot of slow tempo strength training. And because I had experience with bodybuilding when I was younger, I started to have flashbacks of like, man, this is starting to feel like bodybuilding again. I'm doing focused, slow, controlled work, which was actually it was great for my body. It was great for my brain. And it was a welcomed change of pace for me because I had just been basically competing for 5 months, 6 months in a row. But the difference was that when I did bodybuilding when I was younger, it was bicep curls, it was tricep extensions, it was, leg extensions, leg press. It was very much about what movements, simple movements, were going to give me the most targeted work on my, muscle bellies to help them grow and look better. Whereas now, I was doing functional patterns as I suppose defined by CrossFit, like, squatting patterns, bending patterns, pressing, overhead, horizontal pushing, pulling. I was doing strict gymnastics. I was doing a lot of the same stuff that we see in our sport, but I was doing it in these more slow and controlled, focused ways. So then it kind of blended for me, like the feelings of bodybuilding when I was younger, as well as the feelings of functional movement, that I really got into with strength conditioning and CrossFit. So functional bodybuilding to me was like, I just slapped a term on it one day on Instagram. I was like, hey, I did a workout. I was like, man, this feels like bodybuilding, but it's more functional. So I'll just call it functional bodybuilding. And then it kind of, at the time, it was also like, man, I was loving my training. I was just loving what I was doing. I was going in, doing something that felt different. I hadn't done it in a long time. And I was just enjoying it so much. And you couldn't get me excited to go do a 3-2-1 for time workout. If somebody's like, let's go do Kelly, I'd be like, no thanks. Like this is how I'm having way too much fun. Just, getting strong. I was feeling good. I felt like I looked good. Energy was up. So then it was like, okay, functional bodybuilding started to kind of be this way of also talking about like, loving your training and that going and beating yourself up and doing like high intensity, you don't have to do that in order to feel good and to get stronger and to move well, and I think that's a misconception is that, because CrossFit is defined as high intensity functional movement performed across broad time and modal domains, it's like, if I'm not going and doing like mind, altering, numbing workouts where I'm like, puking at the end, then you didn't get a good training session in, right? And, so this was kind of like a way of saying, look, I can get a great training session in. I can keep myself out of that zone because my body needs a break from it after a long competitive season. And, combined, like I sort of carry that with me. And now, what is functional bodybuilding looking like? Well, I started an Instagram page called functional.bodybuilding, and that's specifically for me to post some of the movements that I'm doing that kind of fall outside of the traditional scope of our functional movements that we see through CrossFit, just to give people ideas on, accessory movements that they can be doing, strength training movements that are unilateral in nature. one arm, single leg, things like that. Showing people how to implement some tempo into their training by, showing different pauses and so forth. It's really just examples for people to kind of take inspiration from. And then additionally, I released a 12-week, program that people could purchase, and they could basically go and try and experience what it's like to implement some functional bodybuilding into sort of a full 12-week, 5 days a week training program that involves some conditioning. It involves some like core movements like deadlift and back squat and front squat and muscle snatch and things like that, along with some of these accessory movements that slow people down, get them to focus on what's actually working, right? Like you teach a beginner to do a push press and they're just trying to go from point A to point B, and they don't know whether their shoulders are firing. They're not feeling any control through their triceps. They're not actually focused on their hips, but if we slow things down and we say, okay, well, let's go do a single arm dumbbell pause push press where you pause at the top, you pause in the dip, that might give them a little bit more access to be like, okay, yeah, connect with the shoulder, connect with the hips, connect with my torso position. So yeah, that's what the 12-week program that I released about 6 weeks ago was designed for. And so we have about 300 people doing it right now, and the feedback has been great. And we're gonna re-release it on July 9th, which would be a great opportunity for people to try some of these philosophies and principles out.
Yeah, we'll in the podcast we'll add all the links to the Instagram page, to their website. But functional bodybuilding, as you said, this program, who is it for? Like, is it for a competitive CrossFit athlete that has some off season, like 2 months of off season, 3 months of off season, wants to take some rest, but still get better and work on his imbalances? Or maybe it's for general population, somebody who never done CrossFit just wants to get into CrossFit through some functional bodybuilding. Now, who is it for?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So again, it comes back to the definition of it, right? And keep in mind that my definition it's very loose, right? It's a set of principles around movement and training that could be applied to a variety of different athletes. So I'm a competitive athlete in the sport of fitness, and throughout the training year, and I also coach, athletes that are regionals, competitors and some games competitors. And so when I coach those clients, there are aspects of functional bodybuilding in their training, right? So they might do, it might be mid-off season, and we're going through an overhead, strength cycle where they're trying to improve their jerk. And so they might do a train session where, Wednesday they do split jerks off the blocks. And then as an accessory to that, they do single arm seated dumbbell Arnold presses, right? At a tempo, right? Which is going to give them, an opportunity to work shoulder stability as well as, concentric, eccentric strength. And so that's a functional bodybuilding movement, right? And I'm putting quotes around that because I would hate to say that I define that as the hallmark exercise, but you could understand how that plays well within a competitive CrossFitter's, journey, right? Mm-hmm. Even closer to for example, I have a client that's training. She has regionals this weekend, okay? Team regionals this weekend. In the last 4 weeks, since the open was over, or 5 weeks, I've given her some functional bodybuilding work to do during the week, because on the weekends, she's doing these team training sessions that are super intense. So now on Tuesday and Wednesday when she trains, I got to bring that intensity down so that she can recover. And a great way for me to do that is to give her some simple functional bodybuilding stuff to do rather than 3, 2, 1, go, right? So that fits into like a, peak season, the off season training cycle for an athlete or a competitor, could look exactly like what my training looked like, 4 or 5 months ago, which was heavily influenced by functional bodybuilding. And then certainly for a general population, I think it's fantastic because it combines, certainly it can be combined with some intensity, but what it does is it gets people moving in great functional patterns. It keeps them out of super high stress, right? Because if you go, 500 meter row as hard as you can, rest 3 minutes, 500 meter row as hard as you can, you do that 5 times, that client's going to walk away pretty stressed from that session, right? Which you might say, okay, well, they got some great intensity. Yeah, they got great intensity, but now they're going to go home and they're going to take a nap because they can't stay awake, right? And they're supposed to be playing with their kids, you know, or they like, you know, they come in the morning and then they go to work and they're like, they can't even focus at work because they're like still wanting to throw up from the workout at the gym. You know, is that good for that client? Maybe. Or maybe they needed to just come in, get a good sweat, good motor patterns, good functional patterns, you know, and get a good pump. Like, I don't know, like they could still be super functional and they could still do like the workouts. And I would argue that these types of training sessions can prepare people for it. And honestly, like I need to go only as far as the feedback I've gotten from the participants. I have participants that have said to me, they're like, this is the most fun and rewarding program I've done in years. And, you know, I don't think that's because it's like I had some secret that I was like, you know, like I unleashed on the world. I think it's because it's a change from the mentality of it's either, you know, I go until I, you know, puke or I don't go at all. Like there's a huge range in between there. And you can get some great training from that. So general population, competitor, you know, rehabilitation. I mean, these principles, they apply in a lot of different settings.
Okay. Now, in our podcast, we have like few questions, quick questions, you know, for the end.
Yeah, sure.
We ask always for tips for beginner athletes, and maybe a few tips from some athletes that are already in CrossFit. And we ask if you have any tips for coaches.
Yeah.
For
Great.
Coaches. Those three.
So let me start with the coach, okay?
Okay.
So I think the tip for the coach is before you teach somebody something, always assess where they're currently at. Okay. So that's a very just broad, general like a statement. But if somebody comes in and it's their first day and you're like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to squat, and you go and start teaching. Okay, so put your feet here. Okay, and then turn your toes out a little bit. Okay, you're going to try and send your butt back, and you keep your arch, you know, your lower back arched. All right. What if that person is like a national champion weightlifter? Why the fuck are you teaching them how to squat? You know, like, why didn't you ask them to squat first? You know, like, hey, would you do a squat for me? You know, and they're like, I mean, they're like, okay, where's the weight? They're like, oh. Like you're wasting your own time, you're wasting their time, right? And then also you could say, hey, would you do a squat for me? Like, hey, I want you to show me what your best squat is. Somebody goes down, they on their toes, and their knees are going forward, and their back is all rounded, and you're like, okay, so come on over here. You know, we're going to start with it. You know, like then you know where to start somebody.
So assess
and I see
first
it just
and then to
assess, and then you can start to coach people, right? So that's the coach prescription for the beginner or the new person to movement or functional movement. You know, I would say that as a general rule, slow before you move fast. You know, be a master at moving slow before you attempt to move fast. So it's, you know, can you perform 10 perfect air squats? You know, can you perform 10 perfect goblet squats? You know, can you perform, you know, 3, you know, good back squats at a slow tempo? Okay, like now let's go do Tabata air squat, right? Like, you know, understand that, like, and emphasize this with your clients. It's like, you know, become a master at moving slow, then you become a master at moving fast. You know, so, you know, strict pull-ups before kipping pull-ups, right? You know, push-ups before burpees. You know what I mean? Like, you know, this client comes in, they can't do a push-up, but you make them do 100 burpees in a workout. It's like, well, that's 100 push-ups, and they're doing it on a shoulder that can't even handle one strict push-up. So that's, you know, that's what I tell a client. And then for somebody who's been in the game for a little while, you know, CrossFit for, you know, 3 to 5 years, I mean, this obviously should happen with the earlier people too, but I would really just emphasize the importance of recovery habits, from nutrition to rest recovery, because as you get further along, you become capable of doing more and more. And just because you're capable of doing more and more doesn't mean you deserve to do more and more. You know, you've been in it for 3 years. I'm going to start doing 2 a days. It's like, yeah, well, you sleep 3 hours a night and you eat like an idiot. So you shouldn't do 2 a days. You don't deserve to do 2 a days. You know, focus on, emphasize the importance of that, because with that comes they earn the right to do more and more.
Great answer.
Yep.
Answers.
Got it.
Yep.
I'm
Nailed
sure-
it.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so where people can find you? We'll add the links, but you can just say so.
Yeah. Marcus פילי on Instagram. Functional.bodybuilding on Instagram. My coaching business is called Revival Strength, and we are at revival-strength.com. We have links to our remote coaching services. Go to revival-strength.com and you'll be able to put your name and your email onto our mailing list, and you'll get a 3-day free sample of our 12-week functional bodybuilding program. So you can go and try out 3 days of training and see if it's something you like. We'd love to get people to sign up in July for that program. So it's coming July 9th.
It opens in July, but can I jump in now on the week now?
Nope.
Like how it works?
We have like closed registration for a week,
So you
and then
register before and
yeah,
then you start.
So right now we have the same people, like same 330 people going through the same weeks, right?
Yeah.
And so hopefully in July we get another good crop of people coming through. It'll start in July and it'll go for 12 weeks from July. I think it's July 10th is the first day, or July 9th is the first day, and so the registration will be open the week before.
Great.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
That was amazing, man.
Yep, that was amazing. Yeah.
Great to connect with you guys. Thank you for making this happen, and I really appreciate you guys, inviting me to be on the show.
Thanks a lot.
Right?
All right, you guys, be in touch.
Bye.
הגעתם לסוף של הפרק. אם אתם אוהבים את מה שאנחנו עושים, הפודקאסט, תעשו לנו לייק בפייסבוק, בעמוד שלנו ברבלוסופיה בעברית, או אפשר גם לחפש ברבלוסופי באנגלית. תעשו סאבסקרייב ביוטיוב לערוץ שלנו, ואם אתם מקשיבים לגרסת האודיו, סאבסקרייב באייטיונס או ספריקר. אנחנו עושים את זה בשבילכם, ולראות את כמות העוקבים שלנו עולה, זה מה שנותן לנו את המוטיבציה להמשיך.